And this is relevant because Pluto uh, probably already has. Pluto is the only planet besides Mercury that gets close to the sun. It's really crazy, but Pluto's orbit with the sun, it's an oval shape that extends out like this. Right? So if this is the sun, Mercury is constantly circling the sun, right? But the Pluto actually gets closer to the sun at its points. Like I'm not too sure exactly where in its orbit it gets closer. It can get closer to the sun than Mercury, and so in this way, Pluto is sort of like the Lilith, the sort of the deities that I would ascribe to Pluto that I like think are like 1,000% are the energy of like the energetic bodies of Pluto are definitely Lilith, the Morrigan, uh, and then also possibly the Gorgon. And so what the Gorgon and so like Lilith goes into this. A lot of times Lilith gets confused with the moon, right? Because we think about Earth, right? The sun and the moon. And a lot of times Earth gets confused with Mercury, where there's a lot of like mythology, right? How you can view mythology is the relationship between the sun, Mercury, and Pluto, right? So you think like Adam, Eve, and Lilith, right? The sun, right? The star, right? This you know, the gas thingy, the sun, Mercury, and Pluto, right? Mercury being like the servant, right? The counterpart to Pisces, right? Or because Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo. Virgo is the servant. Gemini is the lover card, right? And even in the lover card, right, you can see because the lover card is ruled by Gemini and it is ruled by Mercury. So it falls into, right, Mercury is into this weird triad. We don't talk about it because the planet wasn't discovered until the 1920s, but the sun, Mercury, and Pluto have been in this love triangle for, it has this celestial love triangle that we don't talk about. And then Pluto has moons, even though it's a dwarf planet, it has moons. And the Morrigan and Pluto, I forget, I have a book elsewhere, but Pluto is often referred to as the higher octave of Mars, right? So if Mars is all about like combat and fighting, Pluto is all about like Pluto is the dark subconscious. It's the stuff like we don't want to, like ourselves, that we don't want to think about, but like other people can see. And so Pluto is like plotting, right? She's the Morrigan, she's the Gorgon. She's Pluto is the old woman who's like plotting, like if you've seen Game of Thrones, the Rose grandma, she's like her sigil is a rose. But yeah, the Morrigan she's a grandmother with orange hair because she's Ireland, right? So she's got like, so I think like orange is, it's like when you're older, like the red goes into a more orange color sometimes. And so she's like an orange-haired old lady with a cow, and her cow has like magical milk, and she has two sisters. And then the Gorgon also has the Gorgon before Poseidon, before Greek, the Gorgon has a huge history in that area, and she too has always had two sisters. And I forget, but there like that I had another, I can't remember what it was. I had another sheet of paper with all these different references from Pluto that I had, and there's a celestial event where that involves the moons of Pluto, which are like, because I think there is a celestial event that the ancient people could see that happened like that happened a few different times where Pluto got close enough to the sun to like have an effect, but like they were not able to tell what was going on. But But yeah, and this plays into effect in astrology, right? Because where does Pluto affect astrology? Because if your sun is your ego, right? Your sun is your ego. Mercury is your mind. At least that's the one way to view astrology, right? Is to look at yourself as a solar system, right? With your heart as the sun, or your heart center as the sun, and Mercury would be around it, and then Pluto would be someone else too, right? And so Pluto is your like your dark self, your Lilith, your that's sort of like hidden, right? It's the only part of you that gets as close to your own sun as your own Mercury does, which your Mercury is like your Buddha. So think of like your Mercury as like the Buddha that like keeps your ego in check, right? And the Pluto, I'm like, I'm not even, I still don't even understand. Like we didn't even, like Pluto has existed, and there's like so many different archetypes and like different stuff that we can reconnect to. It's like, oh, this is like Pluto energy from the past, because we couldn't see it, because that's sort of like what happened as originally humans. We worshipped the planets, but then there were like these other deities, and like, in my own personal experience, like, what, who are these other deities? And it's like, oh, like they're personifications of the hidden planets, because like we can't comprehend that. We don't see the stars at all, but the sky used to be so full of stars that you could like see them all. But planets like Neptune, Uranus, Pluto, all of that was hidden even in the old world. We only discovered Pluto in 1920, right, through telescopes. So um there's still that, and like think about how I've like told you that like Western astrology is so like fucked up, how it's like fake and not even really connected. And even yoga is made for men. Like in India, women don't really do yoga. It was men went to like yoga, right? Like men went to India to like study with monks, and they learned yoga, and they came back and they like taught it to like mainly women, and like there's a big history of men like starting weird sex cults through yoga and like tantra, and like bastardizing a lot of this stuff. So yeah, I think there's still like I don't even really understand Pluto still. This is just like a bunch of like everything I kind of know. And I had another piece of paper, and I had like a whole thing. I was gonna like do a whole presentation on paper. It's gonna be more well thought out, but this is what I did instead. So I hope this was educational. But